Okay. Welcome, everyone. This is our Maple Broadband's annual meeting, which is kind of a big deal from our perspective. It's basically a lot of the things that happened that led us up to where we are now. We're going to kind of reaffirm or kind of affirm. And so it's a pretty important meeting, and we're grateful to have a quorum to make sure we get what we need to get done. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll be glad to. I had plenty of time to study it, and I'll make that motion with great joy.
Okay, thanks, Brian. A second from someone? Thanks, Nancy. I'm all in favor of approving the agenda. Raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Great. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Minutes from our April 14 meeting have been posted for a while. I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes. Thanks, Nancy. It's a motion and a second from someone. Thanks, Shannon. We got a second from Shannon. All in favor?
I have an edit to those minutes. Lynn pointed out that she was absent from her name wasn't listed. She arrived late, our treasurer. So I've made that correction in the version that I have. So friendly amendment.
Perfect. So with that friendly amendment, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Raise your hand or say aye. Yeah. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay.
Is this for the agenda or for the minutes?
The minutes.
Minutes.
Okay, then I abstain. I was not present.
Okay. All right, thanks. Was that Zapata?
Yes.
It sounded like Zapata. Okay. Okay. Open the floor to any public comments. Anybody have anything they'd like to talk about right now? Okay. All right. We're going to kind of break from tradition here. I kind of gave Ellie a heads up on this. What seemed like a fairly minor announcement that Ellie made about a week ago is far from minor, and it's significant enough that I don't really want to be the person to provide this announcement, because I think really it's largely due to Ellie's efforts that we have gotten to where we are now. Ellie, could you talk a little bit about our grant accomplishment there?
Sure, Steve. Thank you for that. So as most or all of you know, we received a construction grant under Act 71 from the Vermont Community Broadband Board in 2022. And that construction grant had two requirements. One is that we complete 2,748 passings. So those are locations, according to the Public Service Department, that we pass with mainline fiber. And the other is that we have active service over 244.3 miles. So we passed, sorry, I didn't mean to pun. We exceeded the passings requirement some time ago, but we were a little bit short in terms of mileage. And we have been working with our construction company, our construction contractor, Syracuse, and our construction oversight mission Broadband for some months now on doing some line extensions that will put us over those thresholds, specifically the mileage threshold of 244.3. And last week, Thursday, we activated the final couple miles, actually in the town of Shoreham, that put us over the finish line. So we now have, as of today, we have 247.0 miles and 3,419 passings funded with the grant. We actually have a total of 254.7 miles total and 3,790 passings total, because we have a number of passings in and around Virgins that we built with town ARPA money a couple of years ago. So this is, I mean, it felt kind of anticlimactic, but we've been working on this thing for almost 4 years now, and we finally were over the finish line. So we do have a little bit more money. We have about $200,000 left under this grant that is remaining to be spent by the September 30th of this year. But it's pretty exciting. So in anticipation of this, I started working some weeks ago with Waitsfield Champlain Valley Telecom on the physical plant inspections and the as-built records, and getting together all the documentation that we need to prove to the Vermont Community Broadband Board that we have met the milestone and that our physical plant is compliant with all of the grant requirements and in good quality and all that. So those field inspections, they started them a couple weeks ago and actually haven't heard if they're finished or not, but wasn't really chasing that while we were waiting for the last couple miles. But this is quite exciting because that's going to enable us to submit those things to the VCBB and invoice for completion of the scope. And I mean, that's why we're here, right? So thank you for that, Steve. It's an exciting day.
Yeah, and just to kind of my context on this is that the grant was like 9 million. Was that what the amount for us, or was it?
It was. Hang on a second. I can bring this up. The grant total was 10.843. It was originally, I think it was 8.6 million was the first phase one, and then we received the remainder, the balance of the grant in phase two.
So with this accomplishment, which is kind of the final inches over the finish line, then our obligations under that grant, for all intents and purposes, are accomplished. We have some more steps that we have to go through with the Vermont Community Broadband Board, make sure everything gets signed off on it. But it's a product of a lot of time and a lot of energy invested in this. So we're all looking forward to our next challenge with the BEAD, which is still a pending item. But I think Ellie and I are pretty optimistic that that's going to go the right way, and we'll be able to continue to do with our construction. So yes, very, very, very important threshold we crossed, and wanted to make sure you're well aware of that. Any questions on that before we move on? Okay. We have officer and executive committee elections. We either use one of our officer or elected or executive committee member to conduct this. Maybe Ellie, would that be the best way to do it? I mean, we can ask Shannon to do it, I'm sure.
So what should happen is Justin should give the same report that he gave last month, listing what the nominating committee was recommending, as well as taking any other nominations from the floor.
Perfect.
Sorry to put you on the spot, Justin.
I got to pull up my report. I can't remember everybody's name offhand, but I'm sure I can find it here in a moment. If you want to carry on, back to me, but either way.
I guess perhaps you might say what I believe you reported to us before, Justin, was that all the sitting members of the executive committee and the officers, you want to recommend they all be reappointed. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I didn't have everybody's name offhand, so but yes, the executive committee came to a unanimous decision that all of the previous appointees shall be reappointed and nominated for, and they were all on board for being reappointed. And so that was the unanimous decision by the executive committee.
Great, thanks, Justin. And to Shannon's point, just as a matter of form, but also it's a real deal. Is if anybody on this call would like to participate, would like to tender their name for participation in our organization at a more senior level, like a member of our executive committee, this is your opportunity to speak up. So you're invited now to, if you'd like to submit your name for consideration, speak up now. Yeah. So I think we could take that, Justin, as a motion. Would somebody be willing to second that motion?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Vern. All right, so let's we've got a motion and a second. Let's just open this floor to discussion. Any questions, any concerns before we move on to vote? Yeah. Nancy, you're muted.
I think I just want to clarify, because I think it's true. It wasn't the executive committee that appointed nominations to be on the executive committee. It was the nominating committee, right, Justin? And who was
Yeah,
on who was on the nominating
it-
committee?
Yeah, my apologies if I misspoke. I believe the term was the Executive Nomination Committee,
I see.
but yeah, if my apologies if I misspoke.
No,
And
no,
it
that's
was
fine. I just wanted to clarify. Because
Justin,
it wouldn't really be right for the executive committee to nominate members of the executive committee. It just didn't seem fair.
it was Justin, Ben, and Mike.
Okay, thanks.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion to reappoint all the executive committee members and officers? Raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you, everyone. This actually, I think, is to revise conflict of interest in purchasing policies. Maybe Shannon, do you want to cover this with everyone?
I
Or we can ask
can, I
can
can
ask
cover
Ellie.
I can cover the COI. Ellie probably wants to do the purchasing. Basically, we had something that was in existence that really wasn't applicable anymore. So looked at various models and then tried to boil it down into something relatively short and sweet. So there's 3 pages that really apply to everybody. And then the 4th page is a sign off, and we're only asking members of the executive committee to sign off on that each year, just for not having to run around and get everybody. But we would like everybody to at least read the 3 pages and understand that we'd like you to adhere to it. And this was passed at the executive committee level.
Right, and this and the purchasing policy, they're both of the nature of them does not necessitate a governing board approval. So we've already approved it at the executive committee level. And Ellie, if you could talk a little bit about the purchasing policy.
Yeah, sure, Steve. So the purchasing policy, we updated it really to make 2 changes, and I did distribute the final version of the conflict of interest and purchasing policy out with a board pack, so you guys should all have those. But the changes to the purchasing policy from the prior version were essentially to update the purchasing thresholds to align with the Federal Acquisition Register, which was modified last fall. And then the other thing is that the purchasing policy had some specific requirements around terms that were copy pasted out of the grant that we had at the time, I presume, but we have different grants now and they have different requirements. And so I think, for example, it had very specific wording around for construction, you needed to use Davis-Bacon. And that's a great example of where, depending on the grant, sometimes Davis-Bacon is required, sometimes it isn't required. And so I took out wording and the changes for the executive committee that was approved, just to make sure that we didn't have a requirement in our purchasing policy that was inconsistent with what our grant actually required. So basically, it was just cleanup. So the purchasing policy now refers explicitly to the terms and conditions specific to the source of funding, and we updated the thresholds for purchasing. So those were the changes. Really just administrative.
Right, again, administrative, rise to the level that requires executive committee approval, but does not require governing board approval. However, the next item does, bylaws revisions. So as a brief refresher for you, we, in order to change our bylaws, we need to vote on the changes on two successive governing board meetings, and we did approve the bylaws changes at the previous governing board meeting. And so here we are, the 2nd meeting. It's also our annual meeting, so it's about as good a time as any to process through and get our bylaws updated to reflect the changes that we've been discussing. You were, I believe that was in the package that Ellie sent out to you. And so you've all had an opportunity to take a look at it, at least to get started on it before we discuss it. I'll entertain a motion to approve the bylaws. Thanks, Nancy. There's a motion. Is there a second? Thanks, Justin. We got a second from Justin. Okay, discussion, questions.
So how does the conflict of interest in policy we just approved impact section 24 of this bylaws?
It merely just, the bylaw part was already existing, just saying that, that we shall adopt a conflicts of interest policy, which will be binding on all governing board members, district officers, and employees. So none of that has really changed. And we just have one that replaces the previous one. So it's all, the only thing that's really changed is we've added ethics to this section and outlined that we must adhere to the ethics, as you pointed out last month, Ross, in 24 VSA Chapter 60.
And we can approve this with that major change in one meeting?
We adopted that last month because we said if we made that change. So we made that change on the fly last month and approved it at last month's meeting. So yes, we can, because this is the second time we've approved it, if we approve it.
It was a friendly
Okay.
amendment. It was a friendly amendment at that meeting, which, and the group approved it with the friendly amendment.
Okay, I guess I thought we had approved the whole conflict of interest policy that was VSA chapter 60, not just the ethics part, but that's fine, whatever.
Any other items? Any other questions, concerns? Okay. All in favor of approving the bylaw changes as tendered with the governing board, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Okay. This is another biggie coming up. Those of you who've been with us for a long time know that our audit has been an ongoing project. And as I recall, maybe the first year that we had an audit that we needed to get approved by our governing board, we didn't have it ready for you to take a look at until the end of the year. And we're supposed to have this done by now. So we actually, we finally hit that threshold after lots and lots of lessons learned. So this is, from my perspective, great news, because I think from now on, we can reasonably expect that we'll be able to continue to receive the audit for the previous year at our annual meeting going forward. How do we want to approach this, Ellie or Lynn? Do one of you want to talk about this?
Lynn has just arrived. You're muted, Lynn.
Hi there. Sorry I'm late. So you're asking, do I want to talk about the audit now?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. So the audit got done on time for this meeting tonight, which I think is terrific. It was a clean opinion, which is also really encouraging. It was not as complicated an audit process this year. Yeah, so overall, I think it was pretty successful. And I'm wondering, does anybody have questions?
It has been distributed. Ellie distributed it last week, so hopefully you've had an opportunity to review it.
And the
Yeah,
only
and the
other thing that I want to share is that the Finance Committee has looked at this report twice. So we looked at it about 2 weeks ago. Ellie and myself and Darlene had a couple of outstanding questions before we were ready to have Bonnie send us the final draft. And then we brought that back to the executive committee last week, and the executive committee made a motion to recommend that the audit be approved by the governing committee. So anyway, that's where it was left. But before you move forward with the motion, if that's what folks want to do here. Ellie and I are happy to answer any questions you might have.
Well, let's take your comment as a motion, Lynn. Let's ask someone for a second and we can have some discussion.
Okay.
Lynn's not a member of the governing board. She can't make a motion.
All right, well, Nancy just made a motion then.
There we go.
Do we have a
Sorry.
second?
Want to make sure we do this properly.
Okay, we got a second from Chris.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions, discussion, concerns?
Justin?
Yeah, this just might be my unfamiliarity. I haven't seen a lot of audits in my life, fortunately. So, but at the end, the status of prior audit findings as of December 31st, 2024, the finding 2024-001, the status unresolved, is that for in regards to as of December 2024 and then it got resolved, or is that as of now? And that's just my lack of understanding.
Yeah, that's a good question, Justin. So at the end of 2024, there were some findings, and Ellie, Darlene, and myself addressed those findings. We had a corrective action plan. So we worked on the corrective action plan during 2025. And so that comment is referring to that. And then there was a comment for 25, you know, sort of less serious comment, but a comment nonetheless, because there was an adjustment of 65,000 plus. We talked with the auditor about that. You know, we had a long conversation about that, and the auditor was obligated to put that in as part of her due diligence as an auditor. But that adjustment was between grant revenue and deferred revenue. You know, in the big picture, it's not a material. You know, material in terms of dollars. Misstatement. And anyway, that's what that's about. And we still got a clean opinion on the, so it didn't rise to a level that we wouldn't get a clean opinion for the audit.
Yeah, if I could just give a little more color to that, it had to do, so the grants we've received to date are federal reimbursement-based grants, which means that you recognize the revenue for the grant when you spend the money for the grant. And the new grants that we have going forward, for example, the BEAD grant that we will be getting the grant agreement later this year, and the Affordable Long Drop grant that we actually just got a couple of weeks ago, those are fixed amount subawards, where when you hit a milestone, you recognize the revenue. It's much simpler from an accounting standpoint. And as it relates, and specifically that $65,000 adjustment had to do with the sale of materials from prior years, where Lynn and Darlene and I were trying to clean things up. And to make a long story short, things got a little bit confused between revenue that's money we'd already spent and revenue we'd already recognized in the cleanup. So essentially the auditor, we were all on board with what we were trying to do, but the auditor had to make an adjustment to how we actually had recorded these things in our books. And now we are really clear on how to handle material sales going forward. We are also crystal clear on how to handle deferred revenue and recognizing grant revenue going forward. So I don't expect to see this in the future. And I think, Lynn, you would probably concur with that as well.
Totally. We won't be seeing this again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, Justin. Good question.
Any other questions? Are we ready for a vote? All in favor of approving the audit, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Ellie, I think you need to talk about new board member onboarding, if you would.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. So this was added to the agenda at my request. We have a couple of new and recent board members, and it occurred to me this organization is still relatively new. We were formed in late 2020. We're in 2026 now, and what we're doing has a pretty substantial amount of technical complexity and specificity to it that is kind of unusual. I mean, I sit on a number of nonprofit boards here, and I'm sure you guys all do as well. And this one's pretty complicated. We have acronyms we use all the time. And I mean, even what I was just talking about, if you think about earlier in this meeting, we've talked about everything from the Vermont statute to the Federal Acquisition Register to different types of federal grants. And so it occurred to me that one of the things that would possibly be a good idea for Maple Broadband to consider is having a new governing board member onboarding process, and potentially similar sort of thing for people moving from governing board to executive committee, just to improve our governance and make sure that when people come onto the board, they're not completely confused with what on earth are they actually are you hearing, and how do you ask intelligent questions, how do you make sure that you're fulfilling your duties of governance. And so what I thought would make sense is to raise the subject here and put this in the back of everyone's mind, because I think it might make sense for the governing board to consider forming a subcommittee to work on this specifically. But there's also not really any huge urgency for it. And again, people are quite busy. But I was thinking, especially for those of you who are newer governing board members, if you could consider making a list of things that you didn't understand or that weren't clear to you, either as they happen or later on over the course of this year when you're 6 months in and you say, I finally get this thing now. Because it also occurs to me, if I just think about the time that I spend talking at governing board meetings, and not that this is a negative thing or anything, but because I'm in this every day, but I often feel the need to contextualize things just to make sure that you understand what I'm talking about. And for some of you, if you've heard it 50 times, it might be a little bit irritating, but for some of you, it might be really necessary. And so I think just, again, understanding, just considering those things as we're going through meetings and saying like, all right, here's something that would be useful to have as a written reference so that it doesn't need to be explained every single time. Here's something that would have been really useful for me when I was coming on board, or just things along these lines. So I thought that this would be a good time to start essentially information gathering of what information would start to make sense for new governing board member onboarding. And then also just general consideration as we move from where we are now, which is construction and active service, into the future, and thinking about what this organization might look like when we're not doing as much as what we're doing now, thinking about what governance would look like. Because again, I'm relatively certain that everyone or almost everyone on this board is familiar with smaller nonprofits and governance in general. And I thought it would be good for us to just talk about how we can improve the governance of what we have now, and how we should be considering governance best practices for this relatively new and also large and unique organization. I mean, CUDs EC Fiber's been around for a long time, but it's still quite new in Vermont. So that's my request, is that it came up in the context of, do we want to be considering how we onboard new members? But I think it's actually a broader topic of governing board governance. Nancy?
I think that is a great idea. And that said, I just want to encourage all of us, new board members and not so new board members, to try not to feel shy about asking questions at our meetings, because if you've got a question on your mind, chances are you're asking it is going to be helpful to the organization. And chances are there's someone else on the board who has a similar question and may not feel so forthcoming about asking it. So please feel free to ask questions. Please feel free to make us explain our acronyms and explain the details. I've been on the board really since the beginning, and I feel like I still have just a ton to learn. So so please don't hold back in that regard.
Ross?
Yeah, I was just wondering, one thing that might help me is if it's possible to send out the packet for the board, the meetings, a little earlier, maybe instead of 3 days or so, maybe 5 or 6 days ahead of schedules, so I have more time to review everything and not feel quite so rushed? Is that possible? Or is that too
I
much?
think that's certainly reasonable unless, for example, some month we're waiting on something. Like in this case, I probably could have sent it out a day earlier, but I didn't want to send out the audit until the finance committee had voted on it, for example. But that's also, I mean, and that's a great point because different people have different preferences. Some people don't like to get it too far in advance because then it gets lost in the email. So, but I'm quite happy to send it out in advance. If people, rather than saying that on Fridays, I could put a calendar reminder to send it out on Tuesday the week before, because we're now going to be, from next month, we're going to be changing from Tuesday to Monday. So if people have a preference as to what day, let me know. Why don't I plan on doing it Wednesday going forward, and then we can see how that goes. Does that work for everyone?
Thanks.
No problem. Over the weekend, yeah, I get that, Zapata.
Okay.
Going back to the last point, Ellie, do you have a specific suggestion about the onboarding or the orientation? I think it's a great idea also. What do you have a suggestion about what to do about that specifically?
Well, off the top of my head, I think it would probably be helpful to give people who aren't necessarily familiar with the telecommunications industry a basic primer on like what it is, how it works, who the competitors are, how we're different, just things like that. I mean, I actually don't know how it is that everyone who's on the board became familiar with the fact that there is a CUD and went about, like, I'm not sure if you asked your towns to be appointed or someone twisted your arm or whatnot, but and I think that's also part of raising it here is just to understand like where are you, like, yeah, what is the origin and like what is the information gap between the context and knowledge that you kind of wished you had and where you started.
Yeah.
And I think we'll probably get different answers from people who've been on the board for a couple of years who now have a lot of that context, or maybe there's some things that you still wish you knew more about versus newer people.
I think context is helpful, whether we know or think we know or not. And I think as we're advocating everything to do with mobile broadband in our communities and throughout the state, I talk about us outside of Addison County, right? And so it also helps us stay on the same page. So I think starting out with a primer is maybe a good idea. I don't know, once or twice a year, having some kind of a, I'm not sure. Again, I'm not sure what I think is a great idea, just as Nancy does. I'm not sure what I would suggest. I'm learning a lot from just reading our monthly materials and attending the meetings, but I don't know what I don't know. So good idea.
Yep.
Let's move on. Updates. I think Ellie, all three of those are probably in your court. If you could start with A and move your way through it, please.
Sure. I think all four, well, three of them, and then I can turn over to Ashley, who can give the marketing update. Be nice for me not to have to give every update. Okay, so the first update is BEAD. So there's not too much change on the BEAD side. As you all know, we resubmitted our BEAD application to remove some addresses that were already federally funded, and we haven't heard anything back on that and don't know when we will. So that's that. What we do know, the situation has not changed, that the state of Vermont needs to execute all of its grant agreements with subgrantees, including us, by the 4th of September of this year. So sometime between now and then, we will be getting a grant agreement. What we have been doing in the meantime is working on continuing to refine the engineering and bill of materials. We put out a request for quotes for fiber optic cable, and we actually placed a purchase order for fiber optic cable late last week. So that's got about a 6-month lead time, which is because it's one of the requirements of the BEAD program is that it be compliant with the Build America, Buy America, and that cable has a particularly long lead time. So that is what it is, but we have the order in now, and maybe it'll arrive sooner. And the other thing that we're doing is starting to work through the permitting process. And so I've talked before about NEPA, which is the National Environmental Something Act. But it's we have to get a thumbs up that we have ticked the boxes for NEPA before we're allowed to break any sort of ground, even make ready. Which, under the rules of this grant, we are allowed to perform certain activities at our own cost and risk. So, for example, engineering design, procuring materials, starting to work on permitting. And then once we've received the NEPA sign off, we can begin to break ground again at our own risk before before we have the grant agreement. And so we have divided our project conceptually into 4 different NEPA project areas. One is the area in and around Virgins. One is Middlebury and the southern part of New Haven and Salisbury and Leicester, the areas that are getting built with BEAD. Another one is Ripton, so the Old Town Road and the area over to the mountains, over on the other side of the mountains. And then the 4th one is the WCPT portion of our network build. So those are the 4 different NEPA project areas, and I'm working right now with WCPT and our the GIS engineer that works for the Vermont CED Association of Akuta to put together all of the materials to get those things separated and submitted so that we can get them. Because the first thing is to take our project area and divide it into 4, and then the second thing is to sequentially work through and work on obtaining the NEPA approval. So the first one that we're going for is Virgins. The main reason there being that we've had a lot of the make ready done for some years now. We have those pole licenses. We even have Strand up in some cases, and we have the central hub is already there. So if we can, as soon as we can get the NEPA approval on that, there's some areas that we can turn up really quite quickly once we have the materials in hand. So that's what's going on with BEAD. Nancy.
I'm asking this question, Ellie, because I represent a town that is in WCVT territory. It's not so our build in Starksboro is being handled by WCVT. I'm curious about for WCVT's a part of the build through the BEAD grant. What towns are they working on for as part of that grant?
They have, hang on, I have a map here I can pull up. I have too many tabs open. But Lincoln and Starksboro are the main portions of mainline that they're building. And then they have drops throughout a number of different towns. If it's okay, I can share my screen quickly and show you these 3 different NEPA project areas. I should have thought of this earlier. You guys see that?
Yep.
Okay, so the blue one here, so this is our Virgin serving areas. And so what this is showing, these blue dots are the eligible addresses under BEAD that are being built. So this is our NEPA 1. This is NEPA 2. So you can see there's a lot of addresses here in southern New Haven, northern Middlebury, and a couple scattered throughout. And then down here, Salisbury and Leicester. And then over here, Ripton. So that's what we're building as part of BEAD visually. And then the WCVT builds, as you can see, there's a whole bunch of addresses scattered throughout. And don't mean to pun again, but the mainline portions that are getting built are over here. Lincoln, Starksboro.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Anything else on BEAD?
So it could be any time, but it's got to be by September, the end of September?
It's got to be by the end of September. I am aware that the VCBB is working on, because it's the grant agreements are going to be different between the different BEAD awardees in terms of the scope and which addresses are getting funded, but all of the general grant compliance terms and conditions are going to be the same across all of the entities. So the VCBB has been working quite hard on getting that standard boilerplate grant agreement ready, from what I hear, but I haven't yet seen it.
Okay.
And to some degree, it doesn't really matter until we have received the approval from the NTIA and our revised scope. Spada's got her hand up.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me without delay. Sorry, I'm off camera tonight. So the September deadline has to do with the contractual agreements, but the time frame to implement actual construction is a much longer time frame, and it's related to the completion of NEPA, and then what?
How quickly we can get going. So basically what NEPA isn't a permit. NEPA is a process that we have to go through. And essentially what it looks like is we need to have indicated that we understand the process for the environmental permitting, but we don't need to receive every single environmental permit in the entire area. So once we get the sign off, for example, in the Virgin serving areas that NEPA agrees that we know what we're doing and we're going to follow all the right rules around environmental permitting, we can get started with things that are called categorical exclusions, or CAT-X, which is basically aerial work on existing pole lines. So we can get going on that the very same day as we start working on environmental reviews and permitting for areas where we're going to be burying. And then we're not going to work on those buried sections until we receive the permits. So basically it's the same, I mean, conceptually, aside from having some other authority give us the thumbs up that we are allowed to begin, it's the same process we've done for several years now, where we get the pole licenses for the aerial work, we do the aerial work. If we need to dig up the ground or set new poles, then we do environmental reviews where necessary, and we get right-of-way permits from the local authority. And if there's private roads, of which there are several under BEAD, then we make sure there's existing easements that we can ride on, which there almost always are, because state law allows broadband to be built under existing utilities easements unless it's a material burden on the landowners. So that's what that looks like. So in terms of when we finish is really, I mean, these are like, start to start, or like finish to start kind of dependencies. So when we finish is when we have all the permits and when our construction crews have gotten out there and they've done all the work and we've inspected it and everything's been tested. So, I mean, the BEAD program requires us to finish 4 years, within 4 years of when we get our grant agreement. We don't want to take 4 years to finish this. I think if we take 2 years from getting our grant agreement, it's going to be because we were waiting on some permit that's outside of our control.
And that was going to be
Here.
my next question, Ellie, is NEPA is a requirement under the federal regulatory framework. But if you're going to be doing aerials over like Otter Creek, then you might need an Army Corps permit to do that installation. Meantime, if you're going to be doing buried cable, you might need either a state wetland permit or other permissions, in which case will you be identifying those areas and securing those permits concurrently?
Yes, we will, and to some degree we already have. One of the things that we worked with the VCBB and their technical assistance specialist around permitting, or I guess grant compliance in general, but permitting is part of their remit on a couple of weeks back, was identifying all of the permits that we knew were required and all of the areas where we believed we needed a wetlands review. Because basically, I mean, as you're aware, if you think you might need a wetlands review, then you need to actually go out to the field to see if you need to get a wetlands permit or not. So that's part of what we need to do next, is make sure that we understand if there are any. I need to make sure that I understand, let me be specific, what are the NEPA requirements above and beyond what the state of Vermont requires for wetlands permitting and other sorts of field reviews. And then we'll put together an RFP. I'm planning to work on this in partnership with NEKCV, which is the other CUD that's received BEAD funding, because we have the same exact requirements for field review for environmental permits. So it makes sense to work together on the requirements of what we're looking for and the bid adjudication, and work with the same contractor, and then just pay pro rata based on what we're actually doing. So that's the plan, is to work on getting that done, because the rest of the permits, right of way and whatnot, those are not particularly difficult. Our engineering firm can do those. If they're not terribly difficult, I can do those if I have time. But the wetlands and environmental permitting is a whole specialty. So we need to make sure that we have a service provider there.
Let's move on, Ellie.
All right, so moving on. Next thing is 2026 construction. So I gave the part of the update I gave earlier. The second part of the update is we have, and when I give the dashboard review, I will speak to this in a little more detail, but we have just around $1 million left in ARPA funding between pre-construction, construction, town ARPA, and the town ARPA match funding. And so one of the things that I have been working on is beginning an analysis of how to spend that money. So we had a discussion yesterday in executive committee, and I was given some guidance and some homework to go and refine that further to bring back and finalize. Because we do want to do some additional mainline construction as part of using up the rest of this ARPA money later this year. And that all needs to be done and completed by September 30th. And so it's doable, but we can't be taking forever to be deciding what we're going to be doing. But the reason I raise this is that in order to get the most efficiencies here, we are planning to put out one large RFP for construction services, which essentially starts with ARPA and continues on to BEAD, and then continues as part of that is going to be some things that are along BEAD routes that are not can't be funded out of the BEAD grant, but we want to do at the same time because it's going to be much more cost efficient to do them now than to try and do them later. And so in order to get that done, we not only have to figure out what we're spending with the ARPA money, but we have to work with our engineering firm to make sure that we get a construction bid package out there that has all of those three items I just talked about, and also has them separated out, because we want to get the economies of scale on the pricing, but we also need to be very, very clear that our billing comes back in such a way that we are able to charge the right expenses for the right network construction to the right grants. So that's what's going on there. Lots of detailed planning.
Yeah, just as a reminder, the ARPA grant that's been funding all the work we've done today, it's about running out of steam, and we must spend any ARPA money we have by the end of September. And so Ellie's proposal, which makes a lot of sense, is we would like to have our construction company focus exclusively on ARPA funded construction, but we've already awarded them hypothetically to do the BEAD construction when the time comes, but we really don't want them to turn their attention to that. We want to make sure that we squeeze every last dollar we can out of the ARPA money we've got before we turn to doing BEAD construction. So there's a bit of a time fuse on that we're going to have to track very closely.
And if I could just add, a huge goal is not having to give back any of that ARPA money.
Yeah, no, we won't. I can guarantee you we won't. We have some engineering we could spend it on, if nothing else. Yeah, so we won't give back any money. Someone's hand is up is ACRPC. There's a hand up. It might be Ross or Adam.
Yep. So maybe I missed it, but in your comments, Ellie, it sounds like the issues that was brought up in executive session, the last meeting, has been cleared up.
It has been cleared up in that we have resubmitted and we are waiting on hearing final word.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Knock on wood. Should be fine. Okay, so moving on, affordability programs. So as you know, we had two affordability programs. One is the Local Equitable Access Fund, which we have 13 people who are receiving that as of the end of April. And so that's that. That's a $30 a month subsidy for qualifying households. And not unexpectedly, after we launched this, we received a big rush of applications, and it's since then quieted down. I mean, we get maybe one every 2 weeks, which is pretty much as expected. But we're continuing to do outreach and raise awareness about that program. And the other one is the Affordable Drop Program. And on this one, we have a bunch of updates. So the big update is that the last time we met, we were still waiting on our grant agreement. We'd been awarded this grant of $1.12 million by the Vermont Community Broadband Board in October and had not received our grant agreement. Finally got that about 2 weeks ago and executed that, which is great. In the meantime, we have been doing a whole bunch of work and we have procured services. So we went through a procurement process and we picked a construction partner, which is Eustace Cable Enterprises. We have contracted with an individual consultant in Alex Kelly, who some of you guys may remember from way back when. He actually helped Maple Broadband with its feasibility study, but he's a great guy. I've known him for years, worked with him for years, and he is our day-to-day project manager coordination between all the different moving pieces. He's doing a fantastic job. And we also have contracted with Green Mountain Fiber is the entity, it's part of the Mac Mountain Group, which is like a sister company of Great Works Internet, which is for DV Fiber and Northwest Fiberworks, it's their WCBT, so it's their back office operator, but they have staff in Vermont and a lot of experience. And specifically, they had capacity to be starting to go door-to-door canvassing to raise awareness for this program. So this week, they're going to be doing outbound calling to the people that are in Crowd Fiber who are identified as needing conduit and have not either canceled their order or applied for the affordable drop program. So we're going to go through all 150 of those customers and basically try and sell them on the program. So that's happening, and there's a little bit of a delay getting that going because we needed to make sure that the caller ID when people were calling, or when the person was calling, actually said Maple Broadband and not something else to make it more likely people would answer the phone. So that's happening this week, and then the door-to-door canvassing is starting next week, and that's going to be up in the areas, again, the Virgin serving areas that we've identified as, according to the designs, having a portion which is buried. And the reason we're starting up there basically is that we have less competition in those areas from broadband than in other parts of our district. So we think it's going to be more fertile ground. So Alex said, as of yesterday, I think we had 16 or 17 people that are signed up and confirmed for the Affordable Drop program. So we have a lot more. Our grant is for 168, and we could do even more if we're able to get more and we're able to spend the money in time. So this one also, this is, the grant runs through September 30th, and that is currently the hard deadline. So if you know anyone in your towns that has been thinking about getting Maple Broadband and has a portion of their service that's underground, we would really love to get them on board, because it's a one-time only program to cover those conduit costs. And if the time runs out and we haven't spent that money is turning into a pumpkin. So we don't want it to do that.
And that program doesn't need a financial qualifier, right?
No, that program doesn't need a financial qualifier. There were some constraints that were required by, that also be Ripton residents. So the constraint is it needs to be people in our current active service territory. So the BEAD program will pay for these costs for anyone that's a BEAD eligible address. So at least it won't pay for everyone along the routes, but that is a constraint. It's a good question, but that is a constraint. I can double check that, because if maybe I'm making that up, it's worth having a look at that possibility. So I'll check, but I'm pretty sure it's our active service territory anyway. There are a couple of constraints. So one is that the household income needs to be under $750,000 a year, and the home site value, which is the value of the house, needs to be under $1 million, because the VCB required that we put constraints on the program to make sure that it goes to those who need and not those who don't need. And so if we get to the end of the program and there's still money left over, we can perhaps consider doing a cost sharing with these people, because the grant doesn't prohibit it. It just says that we're not allowed to pay for all the costs of people who aren't actually needy.
Okay.
But we wanted to design it to apply to almost everyone.
Yep.
So those are the two affordability programs that you were already aware of from previous meetings, and we actually launched a third one. We had the press release last week, and the VCBB echoed our press release, where we launched Nonprofit Connect, which is where we offer our highest speed, which right now is gigabit speed, at our lowest price for anyone within our active service territory. Again, anyone to whom we can provide broadband service that is a nonprofit. Because the thinking here is that nonprofits do tremendous work for our community, and there's a lot of mission alignment between what we're trying to do and what they're trying to do. And, again, I know, and many of you guys know, it's hard to make the budgets stretch for some of these organizations. And that's on the social impact side. On the self-interested side, I would rather have an affordable product to have their money coming to us than to have their money going to someone else and going out of state. So that was really the idea, is let's offer something to make it more likely that we're able to get the share of wallet from that portion of our market as well. So that's just launched, and we haven't yet had anyone apply that I've seen, but hopefully soon. Ross? or Adam?
It's actually me. Does nonprofit include government or is it just 501c3s?
It's 501c3s. But I
Okay.
mean, that said, it's up to us if we want to consider changing it.
Municipal.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point. We can take that for consideration. It's actually an excellent point. I don't think we meant to be exclusionary. Okay, anything else? Okay. Marketing. Ashley, would you like to give an update on marketing? So for those of you who don't know, Ashley is one of the founders, I presume, and one of the principals of London Middlebury, which has been our marketing firm for coming up on 2 years now. And she's now the newest delegate from the town of Moncton.
I know, Nancy, I'm hoping my paperwork got in. Otherwise, I'm going to go hunt them.
Oh, you're okay.
down.
You're okay, Ashley.
I think Stan was on top of it. Yeah, so excited to officially be here in delegate capacity. As I just quickly, as I was saying to my select board, I was saying that I want to be able to think about Maple Broadband and volunteer and participate off the clock too. So that's my biggest reason for wanting to hold this position. Really expanding on most of what Ellie talked about, affordability programs are the primary focus on the marketing front. So we have both the traditional and digital approaches and advertising channels that are active right now. Nonprofit Connect, like Ellie said, we released the press release on Friday, parallel with the VCBB. It got picked up in a couple of places, no major pickups yet. So we'll be, we did try to shop for an exclusive and no one bit. So now we're going to go probably to more of the local outlets and just make sure that they pick that up. The exciting thing about Nonprofit Connect is I'm not sure some of you here are Maple Broadband customers. And so when you might know that when you sign up and your service is active, then you get your welcome kit. And for nonprofit customers, we're designing a different welcome kit, and that has a lot more materials that advocate on behalf of Maple Broadband and help those nonprofits know how to talk to their customers, their clients, and their donors about Maple Broadband as well, so they can help us spread the word. And I think that was another really awesome overlap with this audience, is that they serve a lot of the audiences that and potential customers that we want to serve with Maple Broadband. So excited to hopefully have additional reach through this program, while also helping those nonprofits stretch each of their dollars a bit further. With the canvassers, we've provided materials for them, so they'll have kitchen table leave behinds generally about Maple Broadband and some of what we call our battle card components of why choose Maple Broadband over the competitors that are aggressively competitive when it comes to pricing, and affordability handouts as well. And then we are in production with a mass mailer. So there's 2,366 pieces going out to all addresses in our active service area. So folks who can get fiber internet from Maple Broadband right now, they don't have to wait for any sort of construction. And that is also happening at the same time. And I think we talked about this in the April meeting. We are having a promotion where we are waiving the $149.95 installation fee and through September. And so really tell anyone who, like Ellie was saying, who's interested in Maple Broadband or might be on the fence, that this is the time, because basically, I would say for like 99% of potential customers, your first bill will really just be that monthly subscription. You won't have the out-of-pocket cost of construction for a buried drop or a long drop, which averages about $6,000 for folks who do have to get that buried conduit. If they're getting an aerial drop, then they would be typically part of that $149.95, which is being waived for all customers. And then if they have the subsidy, they could be getting Maple Broadband service for as low as $39.95 a month. So this actually, now I feel like I'm just being promotional instead of updating you on marketing, but this is what we are saying over and over again on all channels. And really, if anyone's on the fence, this is a small window, I feel like, in the lifetime of Maple Broadband to really seize the opportunity. And so that is what we're working on, is being as transparent as possible to shout from the rooftops that the time is now, while also being very aware that fraud and scams and a lot of other things are running rampant, and a lot of organizations and banks are telling you to be secure, and even like WCBT sends out fraud and scam warning emails. And so now we're saying, hey, we have all this free money. Come get this free money that we want to give you. Give us your address and all this other information. We'll give you free money. So I'm talking really quickly now, but I think that's the one thing that we're trying to balance, is how do we really, really shout this while making people know that it's all real and an awesome opportunity. So I think that's the big update from the marketing world, but we're excited to hear how the canvassers go.
So I have a couple things to add quickly. One other thing we haven't talked about a lot, but we are gearing up for the summer season, which is where we have festivals and tabling and events and so on. And so we've talked about that previously in governing board meetings, of trying to think about how we actually get those staffed. And so we'll be thinking about those and talking about those more, and coming back and sharing that with you. And we wanted to request on the website, we'd actually like to get headshots from everyone who's a delegate or an alternate, because one of the things in general that just makes our organization more accessible is people can see the faces behind the entity. So some of you have already given that. If you have, please ignore that. If you haven't, please send me a headshot, please, please, please. We'll put it up on the website. And final one is, this is kind of a shot in the dark, but if anyone has a internet-enabled tablet that they're willing to loan to Maple Broadband for a little bit for the canvasser, so that he's able to sign people up on the spot. I don't have one. Maple Broadband doesn't have one. So if anyone has one that they're willing to lend, that would be useful. But it was just a last-minute request. So I figured, since it came in today and I was meeting with you guys, I'd put it out there.
By internet-enabled, do you mean if you're taking it out to festivals and things, wouldn't it need like be on a data plan then?
Yes, or I mean, I suppose you can make a hotspot off your phone. So I think, frankly, like any tablet that has Wi-Fi, and then I could just say, make a hotspot off your phone. That should be doable.
Yeah,
it's not so much.
He's got one.
It's not so much for the festivals. It's for the canvassing going door to door in Ferrisburg and for Gens now. So the internet should be, because the other challenge with that is it's only as good as you actually have internet access. And if you go into some of the nooks and crannies, then it doesn't work so well. But if you have one, if it's possible to drop it at ACRPC, that would be ideal. You can chat to me offline.
I can do that.
Amazing. Thank you, Nancy. Or thank you, Carl. Nancy, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, that's great. Great. Thanks, Carl.
And Ellie, I just have the sponsorships and volunteer needs pulled up here. And of course, field days, it's never too early to start thinking about field days. So that is on our calendar, as well as Virgin's Day. We are sponsoring the horse and wagon, so that gives us banners going around town. We have the option to table there too, if folks are interested. And the energy fair, the Addison County Energy Fair, is one that we're trying to decide whether we're going to attend or not, based on if someone can support that. So if folks are interested, feel like getting the full schedule, feel free to reach out to me directly, or to Ellie, and she can pass it along to me. But we feel like at some point we just need to have a governing board social event amongst ourselves, and then we can feel comfortable with each other. Then we want to hang out more at all of these events, because we're not busy people at all, right?
No, we all got nothing else to do. All right, I'm going to move us on. I think, just in the interest of time, we've got about 20 minutes left. I want to make sure we have enough time for the financial. Does anyone have anything else on marketing before I move us on? Okay, all right, I'm going to make this a little bigger first. Whoa. That is 364% is too big. Too big. Can't see anything. Okay. I forgot to update the affordable drop because we did actually have this grant agreement now. I can fill that in. So, so this is the dashboard. This is showing where we are from a cash position on the different grants that we've received. And so, as mentioned earlier, this is as of the end of April. Sorry. We have, if you add up the pre-construction, construction, town ARPA, and ARPA, we have just over $1 million. And this is pretty much, pre-construction is pretty much all accounted for. This is in our operating overheads and marketing and promotions and engineering. And so that money is going to be spent. And we've spoken earlier about the plans to spend the remainder of this money. As of the end of April, we had been spending money against the Affordable Drop Grant in anticipation of receiving the grant. So I suppose as of the end of April, this is accurate. And then now the end of May will show that we have in fact received a grant. And I actually just sent to VCV earlier today the first invoice against that grant. And this grant, as said earlier, is a fixed amount subaward. And so that money is not reimbursement based. We hit the milestone and we get to keep the money. So the first milestone is for 20% of the grant on grant execution. And then the next milestone is 10% of the grant on publishing your plan to and indicating you've launched it publicly. So I'm going to be getting that out, that invoice issued in the next week or so. And then after that, the remaining milestones under that grant are based on installation of drops. So we'll be doing that and moving that along. Anyone have any questions on the cash grant situation? Okay. All right. So on the operations side, this is where we are as of the end of April. So we have just over $250,000 in operating revenue, which is great. We are now, as Ashley mentioned, we are waiving the installation fee through the end of September. So this number is going to stay static for a while, but we should see the other ones go up. And I just updated the business model with as much information as I have about what the plans are going forward. And that's the next section on the agenda, so I'll talk about that in a moment. But as a result of the recent updates to the financial model, we are now sitting with the exact mileage in service and passings that was expected. And this is as of the end of April. So we're at slightly higher mileage now, and you'll see that next month. And we unfortunately only had 4 new installations in the month of April. I'm not sure why or what happened with that, but I'm sure that that number will be higher in May. And don't really have too much else to say about these other metrics here. Does anyone have any questions? Justin.
Are we averaging typically, I couldn't remember on the previous month on total disconnections, but are we averaging around like 150 per month? Is that kind of like what we're looking at, or what is like 170, 187? Are those pretty typical?
This number here is the total lifetime number of disconnections we've had since we launched service. So between last month and this month, we had 10 disconnections. And it's a great question because we do have churn. Some people we terminate for non-payment, and some people, for whatever reason, they're not super good payers, and then we eventually turn off their service, and often they pay up, sometimes they don't. And as part of that outreach is actually a good point. I will just confirm with WCBT. We'd spoken to them before about if someone doesn't pay, reminding them that we have the LEAF program, because in case the reason they're not paying is that they're not able to pay, it is helpful to make sure that they are aware that this program exists. So I'll just circle back and make sure they are in fact doing that. I know we've spoken about it, but it's a good reminder just to double check because the LEAF program is pretty new. But some people disconnect for other reasons. You know, they move, they could switch to a competitor. I mean, there's reasons that it happens. So some level of churn is natural. And I think this is something we are going to probably be having a closer look at because we do have a heavy level of broadband competition. But normal in the industry. Okay, anything else here? Okay. And we did the budget to actual quarterly, so we'll talk about that again in July, or July, or whatever it is that we've closed out the quarter and those numbers are final. It should be July. Okay, so next item on the agenda then is financial review. So I touched on this earlier. So I have been working on updating our financial model, and I had a conversation with the finance committee about this last week. And to make a long story short, the main things that I did was I updated our projections of cash flow with my current understanding of when exactly we will be receiving cash from the remainder of our construction grant and then also our affordable long drop grant. BEAD, I still have no idea because I haven't seen the draft grant agreement, but it's helpful to have an understanding of cash flow in. What I'm still not sure on, and what I wanted to take another couple of weeks to work on refining, is what we discussed earlier, which is the understanding of what exactly we're going to be building later this year, when we think it's actually going to go into active service. And then also with BEAD, as you know, we have been working with our engineering firm to refine the different serving areas that will be served with BEAD. But what I haven't actually been able to do yet, because I've been waiting on having the right input information, is to update the spreadsheet with the different BEAD, because as I mentioned, we have these different NEPA projects, so starting up in Virgins and then moving into Middlebury and Leicester, and then over into Ripton. And so actually sequencing those in time and putting in the capital costs related to those at the, and putting those into the spreadsheet, but also predicting when we'll actually be hitting those costs. So I didn't do that yet because, or I haven't done all of that yet because I didn't have all of the input information. I have almost all of it now, and more of it is coming over the next week or so. So where I left this with Finance Committee is that that's largely done, but there's still some pieces that I need to actually fill in the dots, and then we'll be having a meeting with Finance Committee to review that in detail. And when it's ready for them to actually review, then we'll be having that review and then bring the results of that back here for presentation. So that's where we are with that. Our financial policies and procedures require us to update the financial model essentially twice a year. So once is around the time of the annual meeting and the other is in preparation for the budget. I think with everything that's going on for BEAD this year, I actually feel as though the financial model is probably going to continue to be a work in progress for the next couple of months between now and September when we start to work on the budget, just because every single month we're getting new information either about costs or about timing or about what the BEAD milestones are. So that's sort of the evolution of my thinking as to where we are. So when we have something which is a better projection and more complete, and the Finance Committee has looked at it, then I'll be presenting that here as well, so you guys can have a sense of what that looks like. Okay. All right, that's me.
Wow. A lot. Thank you, Ellie. And
Ross has his hand up.
Yeah, kind of other business. It strikes me as funny that we have our new delegates and people all appointed in April, but that in May we have our annual meeting. When there's new people that weren't even, maybe not even there for the whole year and the annual meeting and discussion. I'm wondering if that's all set in stone. It seems like it would be better to have the meeting before all the new delegates get onboarded. But that's just my thought. I don't know.
I do have a comment on that, which is that it is a funny thing. I had that exact same thought myself, Ross, and the CUD statute is actually pretty specific on this, that the CUD statute says the delegates are appointed for 1 year and they need to be appointed by the last Monday in April. That's like hard coded into the statute. And then the statute, what it says is that the annual meeting has to take place the first Tuesday in May or is otherwise set in the bylaws. And I'm not sure what our bylaws actually say, but that could be something to. I know we've just revised the bylaws, but we might consider revising the bylaws, or we are, again, the CUDs are new entities, and 2 years ago, as the Vermont CUD Association, we requested a bill with technical corrections to the CUD statute. And part of those corrections were around, again, it used to be very specific with the third Tuesday or whenever it was is when you needed to submit your budget or something silly like that. And so we made it, it has to happen at some point in October and you have to submit the final ones at some point in December. So we are gathering up some other potential technical corrections as Vacuda for consideration. So I'm going to I'm going to add that to my list as well, because you're right. It really doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense to bring on a bunch of new people and ask them to vote to appoint an executive committee and approve an audit. It just doesn't make any sense.
Thank you.
I was gonna say it makes sense in some way because it catches them up on the entire previous year. And so that way they're like, oh, now I have a sense. But on the voting side, I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, our bylaws, we've just revised them a bit to recognize that we can choose when in May we're gonna hold our annual meeting, but it still doesn't address, Ross's comment.
Yeah. It's interesting, actually. The statute is talking about the organizational meeting, and the only thing that's required by statute is the election of chair, vice chair, chair and vice chair. That's the only thing the statute requires to happen at the annual meeting. So we have chosen, for I think good reasons, to make a bunch of other things happen at the annual meeting, like approval of the audit, because it's just kind of logical. So maybe that's something for consideration, to change our bylaws or even just our standards of how we do things.
I guess that's something for the executive committee to ponder.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We're running out of time and we're running out of topics. Anything anyone would like to discuss with the few minutes we have left?
I would just throw one thing out as a local delegate for Lincoln. Residents of Lincoln now are aware that I'm on the board. And as it's my second year, are checking in with me periodically. Not a lot, but three to five every month or two about timing. And I'm wondering, I have said it's all in the works and it's part of a big picture and all that. So I've been very vague about things. This may not be a discussion for today, but how to handle inquiries from the town for which I am a delegate would be something that I would just ask as a rhetorical question for now. It's good news that they're asking.
Yes, it
And
is.
they're aware.
Yep.
And some people said, "Oh, you're on the board again." Yes, it's great. Making headway. Yes, there's it's all working. I think they're happy that Waitsfield Champlain is part of it because I think most of them use that service for their phone. So that's a trusted organization, at least for our town. But I've been, based on all of our discussions over the last few months, I've been vague except for to say it's all in the works. It's part of a bigger picture.
So, and what people really want to know, right, Vern, is when is it going to be available at my house, right?
Well, not necessarily what day, but they're trying to figure out, is it 3 months or a year and a
Yeah,
half?
right,
And
right.
because what they're saying is, I'm wondering if I should buy the AT&T device that'll give me a cellular tower, even if it's temporarily, because I think you should do it on a temporary basis so that you can jump on Maple Broadband later. I think everybody I've spoken to would like Maple Broadband when it's available. So that's good news.
Yep.
But when somebody moves, when somebody redoes something in their house, when somebody decides to start working at home, that's when I hear from them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I think we should clarify is in the town of Lincoln, Maple Broadband is not planning to offer Maple Broadband service there because that's part of WCVT's telephone company footprint. And from agreement from 2021, when we formed our operating agreement with them, we are not competing with them in their service footprint because that would be, number one, that would be awkward for us to compete with our operating partner. But number two, they have such a good reputation. If we had to go head to head with them, we probably wouldn't do very well. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense for us either. So I think that's just one thing I want to make sure
because I'm a delegate. They're giving us credit for it. When Waitsfield has it ready, they're giving us credit for it, which they probably should, and so that's why they're coming to me.
Okay, no, that's great. I just wanted to make sure that you understood because it wasn't 100% clear to me. Yep.
Yeah.
And
that's a great topic, I think, of how to handle inquiries from the people we represent. And of course, how that works is different depending on what town you're in. But
Sure.
But still, I think that, if there's someone I can say, well, you really should call this phone number and ask this question, and you'll get an answer. I mean, that's helpful information to have.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think in the absence of anyone else, I think that's my job. I'm the only staff member here, so you can feel free to bring those things to me. I mean, I field those when people ask a question like that to the info at box. They're not too common, and it's helpful for me to know what they are. And if we're getting a lot of the same requests, then we can look to put out a marketing communication or something like that. One thing that you can say, just in quick answer, is that if you look, I mean, there's a publicly accessible bead map that the VCBB has put out. And if you look on there and you see that your address is one of the bead eligible addresses in our district, I'll find that quickly and put it in the chat before we close this meeting. Then the answer for those customers is the same as our answer, which is nothing is allowed to happen until we get the NEPA sign off, because otherwise the entire grant is at risk. So unfortunately, you kind of need to wait. And I mean, for like we have a portion of our website that's talking about our bead timeline. And I'm not sure exactly what WCBT's comms are around that, but it's going to be the same for us. That we'll put on there updates about where we are in terms of getting the grant and getting the NEPA sign off and so on and so forth. But for right now, we're all in a holding pattern. If nothing is happening, even if we had all the materials and all the provisions in place, nothing's happening until we get the NEPA sign off, because those are the rules.
But Ellie, if you think of it by town, and Starkthrow and Lincoln are in some sense in a similar place around this, because we're both WCVT in their territory. WCVT is building probably in both towns with other funds, not their bead fund, not their bead addresses, but so WCVT there may be someone at WCVT we can call to ask that question. Isn't there someone there who fields those questions all the time?
I'm not entirely sure who that is, to be honest, but I'm sure that there is.
It's probably Kurt, right?
I'm fine checking in to see what Waitsfield, and Ben makes a good comment. Bristol's basically in the same boat.
Oh,
so,
right.
Yeah.
Which is a much larger population. So what is not clear to me is if the concept that the bead situation is a delay from what would have otherwise been, whenever it's happening, has the project officially or unofficially been postponed, whilst we wait for BEAD to give us the green light, whether it's us or anybody else, because as Ellie says correctly, separate program, but Waitsfield Champlain Valley is in the same boat as we are.
Yeah, and it
Thanks,
is a good
thanks, Ellie,
point
for that.
Yeah, it is a good point as well. I mean, there's a bunch of addresses that are funded under BEAD. There's a bunch of addresses that aren't funded under BEAD, and that Waitsfield will get to, because I mean, there's only so many hours a day, and they've only got so many dollars in the bank, and so depending on your address, you might be waiting on BEAD, or you might be just waiting for them to get to you. And they've said all along, it's going to take many years to get every single customer converted over to fiber.
Right. Yep.
We've got about 3 minutes left, folks, so let's wrap this up. Just want to remind you that one of the topics we discussed a few months ago was trying to find a better day every month to hold our governing board meetings, where we could improve prospects for getting quorum without sweating it out at the last minute. And there seemed to be a strong consensus on moving our governing board meetings from the second Tuesday in the month to the third Monday of the month. So that's going to happen next month, and you'll get plenty of notice, rest assured. But we will be, the standing day for our governing board meetings going forward will be the third Monday of the month.
So the third Monday of June is not the 22nd, though. The June 22nd is what's on the agenda listed as our next meeting. But the third Monday of June is the 15th.
Thank you.
So that's the date?
If that's the third Monday in the month, that's the date.
Okay.
And again, we've talked today about, trying to give you plenty of heads up on topics we're going to discuss. And we also are going to try to get the board packet to you a little bit earlier, so rest assured you'll receive ample notice of the of when the meeting will be held. In the absence of anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Happy to entertain the motion.
All right, thank you, Vern. Thanks, everyone. See you in a month.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye, everybody.
everyone.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thanks.